Lib, do you remember what it was like watching our kids when they first started playing sport and what Saturday mornings looked like? It was complete chaos to get there and complete chaos when we were there.
Some might describe it as a total punish in a lot of ways.
Today's guest absolutely knows that feeling. Genevieve Muir is a Sydney-based parent educator, author, obstetric social worker. She's also a mum of 4 boys and a child development expert. She noticed the difference in her own boys, some laser-focused, born to compete, and the others picking clover and cloud-gazing.
Love that. We all know some of those kids.
Jen also noticed something bigger. Parents yelling, a little bit of bribery, and a lot of over-managing. And she did wonder, are we missing the point of kids' sport?
Yeah, look, I think if we are bribing kids with anything other than lollies and, you're trying to pay them to score a goal, I think we are definitely needing to talk.
Jen did something brave. She ditched the sideline manual and now she's here to share what she's learned about the joy of play, about building confidence and real connection through sport.
This is Sportish. I'm Libby Trickett, Olympic swimmer and mum of 5 kids.
And I'm Georgie Trickett. I used to play state-level softball and now mostly spend my time in the car driving my kids to and from sport. This series is powered by Play Well from the Australian Sports Commission, making sure everyone has a place in sport.
And we are celebrating the magic of sport, how it connects us, shapes us, and brings out the best in all people. You'll hear from coaches, athletes, volunteers, and, of course, everyday Aussies.
On the field, on the sidelines, or just having game day energy, this is for you. Sport in Australia is for all of us. Jen Muir, welcome to Sportish.
Thank you for having me.
Jen, thinking back to the early years of your kids, what did you notice about children or how your children were involved in sports and as the parent, the expectations around involvement?
I noticed immediately that kids were going into sport younger than when I was a kid. I found that the minute my eldest son started primary school, he was straight into, soccer and basketball, so winter and summer sports. And I noticed that the intensity on the sideline was sort of bigger than what I remembered. Both parents come, everybody's yelling and screaming a lot. And to be honest, I was in. I was in there, maybe overdoing it a little bit on the sideline.
Upon reflection.
And my husband, so I had never played a lot of sport growing up. My husband had, and he was actually coaching our son's basketball team. And I remember saying to him, why aren't you yelling at these kids more? Why? I know, you're like, Jan, this is terrible.
No.
But I was really intense. I was like, come on, they're not, look at them. It's a mess out there. Tell them what to do. And he was like, they're 5.
Yeah.
Like,
let's put it in perspective.
And what happened for me is I just started to realise this isn't effective. It's not making them play any better. And eventually I actually took up team sport. As a 40-year-old, I had not played team sport before, and I took up basketball. And I realised how incredibly hard it is to coordinate yourself while learning something on the court, let alone if someone yells at you while you're doing it, how hard it is to actually hear and focus out there. And it really gave me a complete perspective shift, was actually doing it myself.
That's so interesting because Georgie took up hockey and she has the exact same experience.
I totally agree. I think parents forget what it's like to learn something for the first time because it's been such a long time since we've tried something new and made ourselves vulnerable in those circumstances.
And it looks so easy from the sideline. You're like, just pass the ball.
You sound like me on a netball court. That's exactly how I behaved.
So I still think it, but I hold it in more because I've worked out it's not effective.
And when you're watching all these 5-year-olds in these organised, highly structured sports settings, what's going through your mind in terms of what else they're missing out on?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm really impacted or my parenting is quite impacted by Maggie Dance, who is a mentor to me and an amazing person. And I learned a lot in the early years of raising my kids about what kids need. And what kids need is unstructured, outdoor, preferably, child-led, multi-age, multi-gender play. And they need experiences to do that. And that's really free play. It's kid-centric, sometimes risky, play. And I sort of started to realise that with the amount of scheduled activities kids were doing, that it almost felt like a train you couldn't get off. Like everybody's doing it. So if you don't put your kid in that organised sports, well, they might not be invited to the birthday parties or they might miss out socially. So, yes, I could have made different choices, but I almost felt like it was hard not to. It was hard to get off the train. And then I just kept being aware of the amount they were missing of free time and of boredom. So we know that kids need boredom for them to build creativity, for them to just grow their brains and build emotional resilience. They need opportunities to get bored and create their own games, which is imaginative play, which is it's how kids, really everything kids are learning needs to happen through play. And just a quick play stat for you because it's so important, but it takes 300 repetitions for a child to learn a new skill or build a new synapse in the brain, except when done through play, in which case it takes 12 to 14. So when kids are playing, they are learning everything they need to be building for life at the desk. Like it's through hanging from a tree that we're learning spatial skills for maths as well as our resilience skills. It's through building forts, with kids and sort of getting something to happen and building a project that they're building all of those social skills that they so badly need. And so I do think with the amount our kids are structured, they're missing out on free play because organised sport is adult-led. It is structured. It definitely has benefits. I've got my kids in organised sports because I think it does have benefits. It's really important to our family, but only if they're not missing all of that building blocks free play.
If we want kids to be doing unstructured play, but we also want them to be doing sport, what would you say to families who aren't in essence particularly sporty? So they might be more artistic, more cultural. Why is involving some component of sport so important for all families here in Australia?
So I think that sport provides our kids with an opportunity to develop those teamwork skills. And yes, they can also get that through free play. So I don't think it's essential in kindergarten, but I think as kids move up through the years, sport does provide that opportunity to feel that sense of teamwork, almost like you go into battle, right? And you're in it together and you're on this team and you feel that sense of the victory and the loss. It also builds resilience. So it definitely does build those coping strategies. For kids, they really might want to be the one that gets the basket or the goal in soccer, or they might want to be the one that gets picked for a certain position, or they might want to make a certain team. And we know that they're not always going to get those things. And so if we can sit with our kids in the disappointment and the struggle of sport, then it absolutely builds those resilient skills. It also builds social skills and awareness of others. Like when we sort of choose that moment to help a fallen teammate or the opposition up off the ground, or we give the mercy rule in basketball, and then we step back and we allow people to have an experience because that's the kind thing to do. Our kids are getting heaps from that, and I think it's fantastic.
I love the way Brené Brown talks about the struggle and being in the arena, and I kind of feel like sport provides that opportunity in a lot of ways. How important is sport? I mean, you talked a lot about resilience, but how important is that theatre and that struggle with sport? I mean, we were just at a gymnastics carnival. My daughter didn't perform as well as she had wanted to and didn't achieve what she wanted to and was terribly upset. How important are those moments, and how do you, I guess, guide and teach and make it a learning moment?
It's so important because these are kids that are not getting a lot of opportunities for struggle, right? So our kids, your kids, my kids, they don't even have to wait for a TV ad break anymore, right?
Exactly.
They don't want for food or for shelter, which is a really great thing, but they often don't go long without a lolly snake put in their mouths at the end of a sports game. So our kids are not getting a lot of opportunity for struggle, and sport can provide that. And it's funny you mentioned Brené Brown, one of my all-time favourite stories. She was doing a TV interview with someone, and she was asking this person because she'd been involved with someone that was running swimming flip turn or tumble turn training. And what happened was the way the coach was training these kids was that every time they did a tumble turn, if it wasn't 100% right, and you would totally relate because it's really hard to learn a good tumble turn.
I still can't tumble turn.
Yeah, no, we've talked about this often. It was really embarrassing when we tried to do it with Georgie. Yeah.
So the coach would just give these, in the tumble turn clinics, would just give a thumbs down, thumbs down, thumbs down. And then when they finally got the turn, thumbs up. And the parents came up and said to the coach, we feel like it's too negative. How about you say, almost there, or cosy, or good job, keep trying. And this coach sort of stood the ground and said no, because when we rob our kids of the struggle, of the thumbs down, we actually rob our kids of the success, of the thumbs up.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing for our kids, is that right from when kids are babies, and it's so tempting as parents, we want to make childhood's magical. We want to make our kids happy for lots and lots of reasons that are super complicated. But actually, when we can learn to sit in that struggle, it is amazing for kids. And that can happen from as young as a young baby reaching for a ball on the mat, the very beginning of sports, right? And we want to push that ball towards them and say, here, don't be in any discomfort. But actually, sometimes what we might want to do instead is narrate out loud, yeah, it's tricky. You're trying to reach the ball. And sometimes you're going to pass it to the baby, but sometimes you're going to stay in that space and you're going to pause. And sometimes they're going to reach the ball. And then the baby's going to go, I reached the ball. Like, how good does that feel? And it's actually no different with our older kids. And I have sat in the car after a sports game. Just this weekend, I came home with one of my boys and he was really devastated with how he went in his basketball game, really unpleased with his effort. And gosh, I wanted to say, but your rebounding was amazing. You were so good out there.
Look at all the good things.
You're amazing. You want to. And I have to say to myself constantly, sit in the struggle, because actually what our kids want and what we all want on a bad day is to feel seen and heard. And the best way to do that is to say, I can see you feel really flat after that game. Tell me more. Or I'm happy to just sit in silence here with you as we drive home if you want. And we just give it space. And eventually they will open up and they will tell us kind of what it is. And again, you've got to hold back. And then eventually, once they've really felt heard, you can say, by the way, I thought your rebounds were amazing.
It's like, good, we can still talk about the rebounds eventually.
Totally. But if we rush there, what we're saying is, don't worry about it. Just focus on the good stuff.
Ignore the bad stuff.
And then they go, you're not hearing me. I didn't feel happy with my performance, and that's meaningful for me. And actually, that fact that they care, how wonderful is that? How wonderful to feel like you care. And let's just sit in that for a bit. But it is super uncomfortable for us as parents.
Oh yeah. I can already feel that feeling of twitch of wanting to say something. Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. Jen, you mentioned before it was so visual, that idea of a baby reaching out. And it got me thinking about that sort of gross motor skills that we're developing. What's the importance of having those sort of activities as we're growing and aging and coming through primary school that give us those gross motor skills?
Yeah. I think we want a mix of those skills. So we want the free play that develops those gross motor skills, as well as some coordinated sports activities that it gives us a sense of how to move our bodies. And I think that's really positive for our kids. And it keeps us fit and active. And again, in a world where probably kids don't get as much physical activity because we are on screens more, we're in cars more, and so it keeps them moving, which is so good for their bodies.
With kids who don't take to sport, Georgie was mentioning about gross motor skills, there's that element of like physical literacy that just in general we as a society kind of need. How do you encourage kids who aren't into sport to take up and learn those skills?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I've got my 4 boys, and one of them, he's born for the stage. So he is just the most gorgeous little born for the stage human. And on the sporting field can often be seen dancing.
Love that.
Looking at the sky, and it's been a really slow burn. Some of the things we did, one, we put him in jiu-jitsu and swimming as well as a team sport, because for some kids it's about looking at, well, how do we build the core strength that might be holding them back from the other skills that they're needing? And I found that to be really, really impactful for him. But we also made sure that he had other opportunities for singing and dance and drama because that's his absolute passion. And then for us with him, it was more like your weekly sport. He's 11. It's kind of just one of those things that we just do as a family. We all do a sport. My husband and I both play sports. I play tennis and I play basketball. He plays basketball as well. And I think modelling what you're wanting, that this is something we sort of do for life, not for right now or just for this team, but it's kind of like you're always doing something. But sometimes it is about, as mums, maybe like taking our foot off that fear of missing out, because I think that's a real pressure in modern parenting.
We absolutely had that experience with cricket. I think one summer we enrolled our eldest girls, they were 5 or 6 at the time, and we would do swimming club on a Friday night and then go to cricket on a Saturday morning to do like cricket blasters or something like that. And they would just cry from the moment we got there. It was ridiculous. And at some point I just turned to my husband and said, why are we doing this? And now they both play cricket.
Exactly.
They're a lot older. They've got that capacity to be out in the sun on a hot summer's day in Brisbane. It's so possible.
I've also seen maybe the kids that were put into a lot of overstructured program sports younger, that those kids can burn out. And so it is the kids that maybe they get to build that, because that intrinsic, you've got to have that, right? To succeed, you got to have that intrinsic motivation and that real want. And that's the bit that I think we rob our kids of if we over-intervene.
We do see an incredible participation drop-off in sport around that age of 13 and 14. And girls are generally overrepresented in that cohort, but it's not by much. From your experience with 4 boys and given kind of the communities that you're involved in, how do we keep our teenage boys in sport?
Well, the school my boys are at, it's compulsory. And I kind of wonder why maybe it sort of should be compulsory for all kids to be playing a sport through high school, irrespective of their gender.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I don't know. Just throwing it out there. Not a girl expert, but just thinking girls need sport too.
Absolutely.
And they need access to fields, right?
Definitely.
They don't necessarily always have that at the girls' schools. So, yeah, I think that it sort of should be expected that we all play a sport, and you don't have to be good at it. You can be in the, the 10th team, but you're just getting on there and doing that. I think that's really good. I think it's good for all of us because, you know how much it benefits you as an adult. It must benefit kids. I think also if we could lower the pressure on kids, they're going to stay in sport. I think that when we make something really unfun, no one's going to hang around in it. And we're going to make anything unfun if we pressure our kids and we make it it's our goal, not their goal. And we yell from the sidelines, making it really uncomfortable and loud for everybody. And then we kind of lecture them all the way home in the car about what they could have done different. That's not very fun. I don't know why anyone would want to stay with that. Whereas if we can ease it back and really just meet them where they're at, like I think one of the most powerful things you can say to a kid in the car on the way home from any sporting event ever is, I loved watching you play.
Yes.
And if you saw them smile at some point out that. I loved that smile I saw on your face at one point through the game. And often your kids, when they feel good and they do have a moment of that, often they'll glance at you from the sideline. And if you can just catch that eye and just go, nah, just say nothing and just, I saw it, and let them own that, it's super powerful. And it is so tempting even to rave on about the good stuff. You got 40 baskets or you got 100 goals, you were the best one there. We want to do that as well. But actually, if we can hold that in and go, how did you feel about today? That's amazing, because then they get to say, Mum, I felt amazing. And how good is that? Because they get to feel that, they get to own that, and that builds that intrinsic motivation.
You sound like you've evolved a lot from where you started. I mean that in the best way.
I'm a forever evolving human.
As an observation.
I've evolved a lot.
From being the parent on the sideline who was shouting at the 5-year-old boys to be doing better on the court, what did you learn? Like, what made you change so much from being a shouty parent? Because we know they're out there, and I firmly believe that most of those people are really well-intentioned, and it's coming from a place of good.
Of course. It comes from love. We want our kid. We
Is it
want the
always
very
though?
best for our kid. No, it really is, Libby.
Okay.
People are doing the best that they can. I will
Okay.
die
You're
on that one.
You're very lovely.
They absolutely are. And when it comes to our kids, I've never met a parent that doesn't want the absolute best for their kids. And it does come from love. If I yell more, you'll go better. And it's so unfortunate that it doesn't work. How did I do it? I think I probably learnt to pause. And I learnt to pause and just stop and go, well, how did that impact my kids? And then I listened to the stuff I was hearing on the sideline. And I've been on the sideline while parents did and said things that wound them up at a tribunal hearing for their behaviour. So I have seen some stuff.
Oh, you've been in the
the thick of it.
You've been on the sidelines.
I was on a sideline once, and our team, the team 5-year-olds, were winning 40-0.
Mm-hmm.
And a little girl on the other team kicked a goal in soccer. And I was like, yes, because I am going to cheer for that. Because it was amazing.
Of course.
Absolutely.
And the people around me on this particular team they didn't boo exactly, but they went, oh. And I was like, really? So, I think we can do better as parents on the sidelines. And if you step back and have a listen, I think you can hear it. And I think all it takes is a pause, or sip your coffee, bring your coffee cup, just sip your coffee a bit more through the game.
We know that in some sports they will give out lollipops to the parents to stop the yelling on the sidelines.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because I know, being generous, we think that it's coming from a place of love, but there definitely are some parents who are thinking that their child is the next insert famous athlete here.
Yeah, future Olympian.
Yeah, and they kind of, it feels sometimes like they're living vicariously through their kids, maybe unfulfilled dreams that they might have had.
Yeah.
If we as other parents on the side, because of course we don't do that.
You guys would be perfect. I can imagine.
Not at all, obviously.
Libby may have had to walk away.
I have walked away many a time.
Me too.
Observing netball. However, if we're seeing it and we're seeing sort of poorly behaved parents on the sideline, what do we do as other parents there? Do we intervene? Do we say something?
If people aren't willing to hear, it's really hard to change their minds. I think as parents, if we can just know that it won't help our kids' performance. So if your goal is performance alone and you're not worried about relationship, which I am, then know that it won't make them go better, number one. And then if you want a relationship with your kid where they're going to come to you with the good and the bad and the ugly at 16 and at 25 and at 30, how we are around that sideline is making a difference to that relationship.
When the focus is so much on winning, what is kind of missing from that child's experience of sport?
Well, first of all, losing is going to feel devastating if they feel like they're letting us down. Like if we focus on winning, and many, that can be really easy to get caught up in as parents, like you won. For a little kid, that lets them know a message, well, it's better when you win. And so what we want to do is I think what I consciously try to do, and probably you guys too, is sort of focus on, well, it's about the effort you put in out there. It's about how you passed to your teammates. You might really on the drive home go, gosh, that assist you did for your friend, that was so cool. That was a really well-timed pass. I noticed that you did that. So we can notice the moments that they're contributing to the team, and then trying to stay a little bit more neutral, particularly with younger kids. Kids want to win. We don't have to add to that pressure, right?
That's so true.
Jen, you have mentioned that you now play basketball and you play tennis, but what did sport look like for you growing up?
Well, I was, in the neighbourhood street gang.
Yeah. She was a BMX bandit.
I'm a third child with a big gap, so I was loose on the streets with my bike and exploring my world. I did a bit of totem tennis
Love
in the
that.
backyard. I swam for hours. So lots and lots of freedom, going down to the local creek and catching tadpoles and amazing kind of 80s childhood, really, when I sort of reflect back, but not a lot of sport. But I do have a bit of a regret that I did miss that feeling of the camaraderie and the joy and the struggle of sport. But also I think the confidence it gives you. I think when you've gone into battle on a netball field or a cricket field or a basketball field with a team and something was hard, but you fought on together, whether you win or lose, I think it builds something in you, like a confidence. And I reckon that would have, that would have been something that would have been really great. And that's why I did turn to a friend at 40 and say, I've never done a team sport and I really want to learn one. And I don't know why I picked basketball, because it's probably one of the harder ones to learn as a 40-year-old woman, but nevertheless.
I love that. I just think it speaks to that whole idea that sport is for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's not just about this moment in time when you're trying to win or do this as a child. It should
and
be
it's the skills. It's those little building blocks. So I remember I had a 11-month-old baby. I'd go down to the courts, train with this young 30-year-old coach down there, baby on the sideline, and I'd be driving my big van around with my 4 children, practicing my footwork in my head. And actually, and you would understand this as a mum of 4 with probably a crying newborn in the car and everybody whinging and hungry.
Always.
And I'm practicing my footwork, and I reckon it got me through that.
You take your head to a place.
I'm not a meditator. I probably should be a meditator, but for me, sport, I have found sport has become my meditation. And same, I do Friday morning tennis, and I find that when I'm focusing on just hitting that ball over the net, which is harder than it seems, I'm not thinking about the to-do list. And so for me, it gives me that as a mum, and I think that's probably what it gives our kids.
As kids get older, the opportunity for rep teams becomes more and more. What advice do you give to parents who are coming into that sort of rep experience for the first time and navigating those new spaces?
Yeah, I think for some kids, reps can be super fabulous. I think for some kids, we have to look at whether it's our dream or their dream and what we're taking from them. So if they're playing one sport only, and particularly if they're being put in a position within that sport, so if you're in soccer and you are just the goalie or just the striker or whatever. So striker.
Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah, thank you.
Nailing it.
Doing my best. Then we know that those muscles are being used over and over again, and we know from physios who work with kids that you can totally ruin a shoulder by 15 if all they do is one tennis serve, for example. So it's kind of watching their little bodies as they're developing, I think, and watching how much that program is demanding of them. And if you have a kid that just loves it and they just love to run and they really want to do the reps and they love the competition, that's awesome. But then maybe look at, how can we balance out the body by not also playing that same sport for school as well or whatever. So I think sometimes when you look at kids and they're playing the one sport 6 days a week and their bodies are prepubescent, we do sort of see that those bodies will get impacted by that once they're in adolescence.
I have a question, because I think what I find difficult sometimes is to be able to communicate something to maybe a coach who might be encouraging or pushing kids into rep programs or to train more. How do we give language to parents to be actually, we've decided not to do that?
I would just say there's lots of time. I think we sometimes feel like that the clock is just ticking. And this is the modern parenting landscape. We are under so much pressure as parents. There has never been a time in parenting where there is more information about what kids need and how we should parent across every aspect. And it almost feels like we've got to work harder to turn out a kid that might reach the potential that we reached, that we have to work harder in a world that is harder and more competitive. And so we need to put them in more things, and we're almost running on a treadmill. And I think we want to stop and just take a breath sometimes and go, actually, there's heaps of time.
And so when you're coming up against a coach who's no, they need to be doing 5 sessions a week now, what do you say to them?
I would look at my kid and I would say, is that working for my child? And I think the answer lies in our kids. I think there are some kids who thrive in that environment and get a ton out of it, and that is amazing, and that's so good for them. What a great thing to be doing. And I think there are some kids where you will look at them and if you're dragging them crying, I think it's a pretty good indication.
It's not working.
It's great feedback.
It's very clear.
Yeah.
So what's one thing that you want every parent to know then when it comes to kids and sport?
that the relationship with our kids is more important than the outcome of any particular game or achievement that they could possibly have. I think there is a lot of pressure. There's a lot of competition these days. And I think that if we look through a really long lens, that what we really want is a relationship with our kids where they can come to us, whether they're having a good day or a bad day, whether they've got a problem or some really good news. We want them to sort of feel they can come to us. And I think if we can sit back more and let their sport journey be theirs, not ours, we are building a foundation.
Jen, this has just been the most fabulous conversation.
That is just the most perfect way to end. That's incredible, Jen.
Thank you so much for
My
joining us on
pleasure.
Sportish. We've loved having you here.
Thank you for having me. Such an honour.
What an incredible conversation. We're so lucky to speak to somebody who has so much insight into what it's like, not only from that perspective of being a parent, educator and expert, but also as a mum of 4 boys herself.
Yeah, I think what I loved so much about what Jen's message is that idea around the parents pausing and really giving space to seeing what our child needs in that moment. And, you know, it might be supporting them, it might be sitting with them, it might be allowing them to feel frustration or discomfort. Yeah, I felt like every answer that Jen gave, I was like, yes, Jen, yes.
It really made me reflect on what I've done over the last couple of years when my kids have presented problems to me, because absolutely my first response is to solve.
Yeah.
And I now can see how frustrating that would be to them, and put that in a sports context. And all of a sudden, you're not giving them the opportunity to struggle. And that was so profound for me, the need for kids to struggle, the need to try and not succeed and then to try again. And if we jump in there and try and solve, we've just removed a really pivotal and important learning moment for our kids. And so great to have someone who speaks not only to sport but to play, because so often with sport we lose the context of the reason we started, which really is always about play.
Always.
And for her to come back and go, do you know what, you need these structured activities, they're important, but you don't probably need them as early as you think you need them. And when you do, remember what it was about.
This series of Sportish is powered by the Australian Sports Commission's Play Well strategy. Play Well is about creating fun and inclusive sporting experiences for all Australians, because everyone has a place in sport. You can find out more about the Play Well strategy at ausport.gov.au/playwell. This series is produced by Dead Set Studios and hosted by us, Georgie and Libby Trickett. Thanks to executive producers Sarah Dabro and Kellie Riordan, producer Luci McAfee, and production manager Anne Chesterman.
Sportish and the Australian Sports Commission acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was made.
We recognise the outstanding contribution that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples make to sport, and celebrate the power of sport to tell stories and promote reconciliation.